This is the Dvar Torah on Parashat Mishpatim, which is following Parashat Yithro, where the Jewish people accepted Hashem's request that they received the Torah, and they received the Torah. And the last mitzvah in that one was to build an altar where the Mizbeach, where the korbanot sacrifice will be offered to Hashem. Now, this parsha opens with the Elu Mishpatim, and these are the Mishpatim. Asher tishiv le'pneihem. And then it goes on and says, these are the ones you should place before them. And there's an and. Now, the parsha then goes on to talk about many, many laws, most of which we would refer to as civil laws between Adam Chavero, man and woman to their fellow man and woman, even though there are some more spiritually oriented, including the last one, thou shalt not worship false gods. And these laws, one could argue, some of them anyway, could be understood naturally. So, what we call civil laws. Now, all of these laws go on. Some of them are talking about what we call civil law, some criminal law, and at the end of the parsha, Hashem promises, if you keep my laws, this is what's going to happen, and how your enemies will never affect you. There will be no miscarriage. Women, all kind of people will be able to produce children, and you'll drive the enemy out slowly. And then and then 70 elders and Moshe and Nadav and Abihu went up to the mountain, and Moshe remained there in the fire. Now, it's interesting, before that, Moshe made the covenant between Hashem and the Jewish people. When they asked, will they accept it, he said, Nasav Nishma, we shall do and we shall hear. They were taking it on trust. They did not know how all the details have necessarily worked, according to at least one source. And they still were prepared to accept it, unlike the other nations, which are explained in the Midrash, were not prepared to do so. But they want to know what was in it, and as soon as they heard one laws, like the Bnei Esau, when they heard they couldn't commit murder, it wasn't for them. The Midrash goes on to a number of other nations. Now, what I would like to emphasize is, so that the Elu is teaching us that, first of all, that even though what we call civil laws or even criminal law are as much a part of Hashem, of the Torah, and connecting to Hashem as the more spiritual matters, there's no separation, as we say in modern political terms, separation of church and state, Havdil, and in fact, in the Constitution of the United States, there's an enshrinement of separation of church and state. Here, it's all one. It's indivisible. Even those laws we can understand, and those laws we can understand, they're all part of it. That's one thing to talk by the Eila. Now, there are many other teachings, and I'm going to just illustrate this, that the Torah has profound profundity and depth. Since its author, Hashem, is infinite, it is infinite. It can never be fully understood on all levels. Our job is to do as much as we can. Now, having said that, So that's level one. Now on next level up, it's a question of why did Hashem say it here? And as explained in the Orach Chaim, quoting a Mechilta was Halakhic Midrash, that there was a machloka between Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Ishmael said the Vav tells us that just like the Aseros and Dibros were given at Sinai, so too are all the other laws. And that's one explanation. Rabbi Akiva says, no, they were all given. They were all given at Sinai. So what was the purpose? What is the purpose here? Is to teach us that we not only that Moshe gave a preliminary explanation, the day of Matan Torah, but that these had to be explained now in all the details. And if he hadn't added the word ve'ela, one would have thought that is the superficial explanation that Moshe first gave when he announced them. When the people asked after the first two, so it was the Hebrew commandments. Personally, it was too much for them. You would figure that's enough. So, Rabbi Akiva says no. They were all. Rabbi Akiva is the one who says that they were all given on a superficial level. Now they're being on a more profound, more detailed level. And that's one explanation. Now, it's I'd like to explore this first pasuk a bit more because it says, "El Mishpatim asher tishlei feneihem." These are the laws that I am placing before you. Now, this sounds like Moshe is going to be told to command them, and Moshe is putting it before him. However, there's deeper explanations, which include here Asher Tishim Lefneihem. Now the Vilna Gaon in the Deris Eliyahu, which Eliyahu explains that what was it before being put before them? That there was a Shem of Shem that all Israel, the Knesset of all Israel, the gathering of all Israel, is four things they need to do. Arba Devarim. Dibur, word. Limud, learning. Shehi Yagor Pehem, that the word should be in their mouths. In other words, they should understand it. Shehai Havanas Halev, should be understanding their heart. In other words, what we would say in this call today, in a certain extent, internalize it, make it one with ourselves. And he goes on to explain, where do we see this? How do we understand this? Because it says many times, "V'dvei Hashem el Moshe lemor," and it said, Hashem said to Moshe tomorrow, this is the Dibur, the teaching, Lamad b'nei Yisrael, Lamud et b'nei Yisrael, to teach Israel, teach the people. This is from the Devarim, Lamed Aleph Yutet, and Zeb l'mimud shemei v'hehem, shemei v'mehem. That is that, in other words, it should be contained, placed into their mouths so that they fully understand it, so they can either for reward and in some cases for the opposite. And then Pneihem, in front of them, is talking about that it should be Havanas Alev. It should be Havanas Alev. Now, that is, in other words, take it to heart, emotionally on all levels, not just as an intellectual exercise. Now, having said that, we then get to yet another level. Okay, it says one of the things the Vilna Gaon says there has to be limud. Fine, there has to be limud. What are we supposed to be learning? And as is explained in Lakutei Torah, a very interesting point. And this is Ela Mishpatim Tashiv Lefanehem Ki Tikana Everett Ivri Sheish Shanim Yivud. If it goes into the second pasuk also, if you acquire a Hebrew slave, you shall have 7 years. Now, a Hebrew slave was somebody who either sold himself into slavery because he economically couldn't survive, or in another case, it's not only that, it's that he committed theft or he committed theft and he could not compensate the victim for the theft because the laws are going to show later. If for actual theft, he has to pay the cost of it. And if he's caught thieving, double the pay. And if he killed or otherwise traded away an animal, a cow 5 times its value and a sheep 4 times, he couldn't pay it. He had to become a Hebrew slave. Now, the Hebrew slaves here are not like slavery as we think of it today. Taking on a Hebrew slave was a very strong obligation. You had to treat him nicely, as the Midrash explains. If he only had one comfortable pillow or comfortable bed, you gave it to your slave, and you kept it. And in the 7th year, he goes out free. And if he brought a wife with him, he takes it. If not, if he was given a wife, the wife and children or the owner's property and stay with him. In any event, but what are we learning? The Vilna Gaon, Rabbi Eliezer Vilna, said, as I explained, what are we supposed to be talking? What is it talking about? That it's talking about learning Mishnah. Why Mishnah? Because there's 6 Seder's of 6 Seder's, 6 orders in English of the Mishnah, and that's represented by the 6. That's represented by the 6 years. That's another level, and still going, as explained by the Shela Mukas Torah. This is Rabbeinu Natan Natia Shapira of Krakow. He was very profound Rav. He was around in the 1600s, and he explains why 6 years. Because this is going back to Yosef Hasadik. In the case of Yosef Hasadik, he was sold by his brothers improperly. He wound up spending a number of years in slavery. In fact, they say actually for stealing a person, kidnapping him, and there's a death penalty for it. But here, what happened? Yosef's brothers, of course, survived because the tribes had to survive, and among other reasons. And it's talking about that just like it's meter connected meter, measure against measure, because initially the people did this so against Yosef, the tribes. So anytime somebody commits theft, Mida Kenega Mida, he has to serve 6 years. I'm not going through all the calculations he brought regarding that and the freeing of Yosef. But in any event, and also, in this, he was ultimately elevated, became the viceroy of Egypt, number 2 only to the Pharaoh. And so in the 7th year, after a person has done tshuva and elevates in higher spiritual terms certain pogroms, impurities that were caused by his actions, and he re-elevates the world of the higher things in the higher worlds to where it's supposed to be, he is freed in the 7th year. Now, in the ultimate meaning, the Magalas Amukot also explains beyond that what is the 6 symbolizing? The first 6,000 years of creation. Because of and in the 7th we'll go free. That will be the Zman of Mashiach, 7,000th year, and higher spiritual things, and we'll be truly free. So this is all, if understood and looked into a bit longer, is contained in this parsha, in fact, in this pasuk. Now, it's not just this pasuk where we can see it. We can also see it that is telling us more than just the laws. The halachas is in the Shara Pasukim, where it also tells us, very interestingly, there's a pasuk later, Make ish and v'meit v'mut yomait. And if somebody kills, and if somebody hits somebody and he dies from it, strikes him and he dies, he's also going to have to die. Now, that seems like a fairly straightforward law. Of course, there's a lot of legal requirements. There had to be 2 witnesses who warned them ahead of time without going into which ilkos of this, the laws of this, which I'll probably be speaking about in a future parsha. But there's something else it's also talking about here. Again, the Torah works on many levels. There's 4 of them. Parashat, the simple, not the simple meaning, the plain meaning. Remez, which are things that are alluded to. A 3rd one is drash, which is hinted to and sowed, is the secrets of the Torah, the most profound level. And as is explained here, but what's it talking about? It's giving us the hints to the following thing. First, that Cain killed Hevel. If you prefer in English, Cain killed Hevel. That's one thing. But beyond that, who's the Ish we're talking about here on a deeper level is Moshe Rabbeinu. Because anything that happens, ultimately, Hashem, either can be over multiple generations, will eventually do a tikkun, will make right. And Moshe is that Ish that we're talking about. And says Mochi Mot, surely he will die. That's the normal translation for emphasis, but it's explaining that it's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, that first time Cain as Gilgal reincarnation was with the Mitzri, who Moshe killed, then had to escape from Egypt. The second meaning, second time, was another Gilgal of Cain, which was in Korach, when we get to Parshas Korach, and Sefer Bamidbar Numbers. I'll be explaining that in more detail. Now, finally, I'd like to explore a pasuk, a verse, which is one of the last ones which is one of the last laws discussed. And it says, that you shall not, pasuk 19, chapter 23, and which reads as follows. Reshit Bekori Machatavi Beis Hashem Elokecha Lo Tabishul Gade B'chalav Imo, and you shall not cook a kid in the milk of its mother. Now, this is one of the fundamental laws of kashrut, and it's repeated 3 times throughout Chumash, basically to teach us that you can't eat a mixture of milk and meat. You can't get benefit from it. In other words, you can't sell a product that had mixed milk and meat, like a cheeseburger, in today's terms. And the third one is you can't cook it, you can't eat it, and you can't get any hana or any other kind of benefit from it. And there's a deeper meaning here too. Now, why should that be so important? And why does it follow up after that? And it says, after that, I'm going to bring you on your way. And after it tells them there shouldn't be any gods, you shouldn't pursue false gods. And Moshe then goes on, what's it leading up to? It's connected to. After Moshe came and told all the people what God had said, and they said, Nasav v'nishma, we shall do and we shall hear. Because in other words, keeping those laws, what's the connection? Rav Shinshan Astropoli has very interesting explanation about the mitzvah. And he also says, he was also going on the pasuk, Ani Anochi Shaleach Malach Lefanecha, I'm going to send an angel before you. In other words, it helped drive out the nations. This is when Yeshua went into Eretz Israel, which was then Eretz Canaan, to drive out all the Canaanite nations, but to do it slowly. There were 30 kingdoms, so the land wouldn't become barren and be transferred to animals. And in the Midrash, it's talking about what angel is it it's talking about. Eventually, it's going to be Gabriel, who's going to be the angel. It's going to take him in. But right now, we're talking about another angel. We're talking about the angel Samael. Now, Samael is objecting. He's he's the angel of Esau, the Yetzirah, the accuser of the people, Jewish people. And he started his job early. When Hashem was about to give Moshe and the Jewish people the Torah, he argued, why should they get it? This is for angels. Look at those weak humans. Why should they get it? And Hashem says to him, and it's based on, it comes out from this passage, that, listen, you say they're not good enough, they're not as high as you. They are keeping the laws and will continue to keep the laws. You couldn't even keep the law, because this goes back to the time God sent 3 angels to Abraham Avinu, after he had the third day after the bris milah, which is the most painful day, and these angels, one of them was sent to tell Sarah that she was going to have a child, and the other two had other missions. And one of those was this angel Samuel, and Abraham served them milk, and he also served them meat. Now, according to one interpretation, they didn't really eat, but according to another, when they took on human form, they did eat. And God said to him, you couldn't even keep that commandment, and you're saying the Jewish people, not to level to accept it? That's one understanding. Another understanding was he also, Shem says later, listen, I'm cutting a brit with the Jewish people. I'm cutting a brit with them and not you angels, because of that incident with Abraham and the merit of them not following Samuel and of separating milk and meat. They're going to deserve to have the righteous angel Gabriel take them in. Now, what I'd like to conclude is, and in the other verses of this parsha, there are many other deep meanings, but in the scope of this Devar Torah, I can only share a couple of them, is we should recognize that the Torah not only keeps simple rules and laws, every pasuk, every word, every letter, every vowel for that matter, has a deeper meaning, and as we should appreciate, as I said, the profundity and depth of Torah, and may we all grow in Torah. Good Shabbos, Shabbat Shalom, and Chodesh Tov.